Hello, my name's Archon Fung, and I'm a faculty member here at the Kennedy School, and I'm here with my good friend Mary Graham. We co-direct the Transparency Policy Project of the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation at the Kennedy School. Mary has just written a fantastic new book called President's Secrets, The Use and Abuse of Hidden Power. Mary, I'm delighted that you're here with us today, and I'd just like to begin by asking you a few questions. Now, your book is an historical overview of all of American history, presidents since George Washington, and some presidents keep more secrets. For some, it's important to be more open with the American public. Can you talk about, in your research in doing the book, what are some of the harms that have come to America, some of the really bad things that have happened to Americans because some presidents kept too many secrets?
That's a really good question. I think the one that was most serious for the longest time was President Woodrow Wilson's successful attempt to keep secret the massive stroke that he had in October of 1919. He was bedridden for a couple of months, and then he really served as an irrational president for the next more than a year. He would do diatribes against people he disagreed with. He fired his Secretary of State for holding cabinet meetings when the president wasn't there. Of course, the president was bedridden at the time. He refused to negotiate with the Republican Senate the League of Nations, which he had hoped would be his legacy. And he was paranoid, he was depressed, and the nation really lost its president without knowing it. So I would say that's true. A better known story is Lyndon Johnson's efforts to keep secret what was really happening in Vietnam, which kept the American people from making an informed decision about that war.
Now, I think almost everyone would agree that every president ought to keep some things secret from the American public. For instance, in military affairs, it would be self-defeating if all of our military plans were available for to the American public, because then presumably they would also be available to our adversaries. And then there's some things that just shouldn't happen or should definitely be public if they do happen, like the Watergate break-in definitely shouldn't have happened.
And then it's changed over time, and you can see even from the early days of the Trump presidency, in the third week of his presidency, there was a robust debate about whether he was wearing a bathrobe when he was walking around the residence in the evening. And as we know, President Obama really had trouble sneaking out for a hamburger because his staff would send around a message saying the bear is on the loose. So digital technology in our 24-hour news cycle has certainly worked against the privacy of the president. But on more serious matters, it's been true from the beginning of the country, and was really established first by George Washington, that military operations and diplomatic negotiations must be done in secret in order to be effective. And presidents in general have, through the first 100 years, stayed with that idea that the default was open government, but that there were these exceptions, and they were narrow exceptions, and secrecy was pretty well bounded in the first 100 years.
And do you think that secrecy is just much more of a losing proposition now for presidents because of technology, because of the rapid flows of information, because of even the ease of whistleblowing, as we've seen in several of the prominent whistleblowing cases under the Obama administration and leak cases under the Obama administration? Is secrecy is it just much more difficult, even if you want to do it?
It is more difficult, but secrecy is still essential to military operations, diplomatic negotiations. Mr. Trump deserves to have confidential conversations with his advisors. So in that sense, secrecy is still essential to democracy. But excessive secrecy is still the greatest danger to democracy because it's absolute power. Congress and the courts can't review something that they don't know. It cancels constitutional checks. So it allows the president to exercise arbitrary power. the complications of the time we live in is that it's harder to keep those essential secrets. So we're having trouble keeping secret our cybersecurity plans. There's a lot of hacking in the Defense Department, and there's a kind of a cyber arms race that seems to be developing where we need to stay a step ahead of the hackers. So it's getting much harder to control the essential secrets that make the democracy work.
Now, yours is a reality-based book in that the episodes that you talk about, oftentimes even as they were happening, but certainly in historical retrospect, it seems like there was a fact of the matter and presidents chose to keep that secret or tried to keep that secret, or they didn't. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, that Woodrow Wilson had a stroke. These are things that actually happened. Now, part of the current news environment, which makes things very confusing, is that we have fundamental disagreement on what actually happened and what didn't happen. How do you think about secrecy in that context?
Isn't it interesting that we say we're living in the information age, and yet there seems much more dispute about what we used to think were indisputable facts? So I don't think that propaganda is new. I don't think that what they say in Washington is spinning is new. And I do think over time we'll get better at fact checking. You know, we do have this richness of diverse information, and in the long run, that's got to be good for all of us. But it is harder to tell truth from spin and truth from fiction. But the fact checking will improve. We're still in the early days.
Very good. Well, I'm looking forward to the next edition or the epilogue of your book that addresses this this a little bit of a paradox that secrets will much more easily out, but when they do out, at least for this particular moment, there will be disagreement about whether the thing that was outed actually happened or not.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mary
you.
Graham.
Thank you.